Are you scared of taking photos in harsh light? I used to be too, but you don't have to be. Today, I'm going to show you some tips for taking photos even when the light is not ideal, harsh light, midday sun. You don't have to go running for the shade. So stick around, check out my tips, and next time you're in a less than ideal lighting scenario, you're going to be able to take amazing photos with confidence. So if you do photography long enough, you are likely going to find yourself in situations where the lighting is not ideal, and maybe you've already found yourself in that spot. But one of the things that can be the most challenging, especially for new photographers, is getting a decent picture when you're taking photos in really harsh light. So we all know that that beautiful golden hour light late in the evening or early in the morning is ideal, and it's beautiful and it can make for great images. But what happens if you're not able to shoot at that time of day, right? There's always going to be situations where you need to know how to work with what you have, and harsh light is completely one of those scenarios. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of just tips, very easy tips. We've got two main pointers that I'm going to talk with you about for when you are taking photos in harsh light. And I also want to point out that for the examples here, I'm talking about using strictly natural light. I'm not talking about using flash to help balance the light in this scenario. This is just you and your camera. What can we do when we're in harsh light with no shade in sight? How do we make it work? Or maybe we've got shade, but it's making our images look really funky, and I'm going to show you some examples and how you can fix it. So let's go ahead and dive in, and I'm just going to walk you through some examples of photos where, okay, here's how we took the photo and it wasn't working, and then here's what we did to make it work better, or here's an idea or a suggestion or a location that would work better. So in this photo here, you can see that the sun is coming in really bright from the right of the frame. And so if you look at his face, he's got part of his face is like really blown out with highlights, and then part of his face is like completely in the shade. And then we've got like a little sunspot on his nose, and it's just very uneven lighting. Is this a terrible picture? No, but is this one that I would want to provide for a client? Probably not, because there are better options. And so this is a scenario where we've got that harsh light coming in, the light on the person's face is not balanced, and so it's taking away from the image. And if you're looking at that and saying, well, that doesn't look that bad, like I think it's fine, let me show you another example and you can tell me which one you like more. So now look at this image. The image here, look at how the light on his face is nice and even, and instead of being distracted by this harsh contrast between light and shadows, you've just got a nice even photo. See how different those are? And the difference is here, we've got that harsh light coming in and it's splitting what's on his face. This image here, there is harsh light around, but I just had him step into a shaded area, or an area that was just out of that direct sun, so that the direct sunlight wasn't hitting him. And if you look at the photo, you can tell that like right here, like there's bright light. And if you look behind him, you can see it, even the shadows on the ground. And what I was having him do is step into one of those shaded areas. Now, this video is primarily about taking photos in that harsh light, but I wanted to point out two things here. One is so that you are able to see the difference between nice even lighting and really harsh like spotty lighting on your subject. I wanted just to show that stark contrast. But I am going to teach you how to take photos when you're actually in that harsh light and you don't have shade. One of the things that photographers, especially early in their journey, tend to do is we've got harsh light, they just flock to the shade. And that's not necessarily bad. Like taking photos in the shade is fine, but I want you to learn how to take photos out in that bright sun and still get beautiful images. I don't want you to feel like you're always tied to the shade, because what's going to happen when you go somewhere and there are no trees? I'm going to show you some photos of us, myself and some other photographers. We were like out in the desert and there were no trees. And so I'm going to show you how we got really beautiful photos in midday sun out in the middle of the desert where there's no trees around. So I'll show you those in just a minute. But first I'm going to start with some other examples. So here's a photo, harsh sun, like right on his face. And it's overexposed. It just doesn't look great. He's kind of squinting. Now, this is a photo of him playing. And so it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but I wouldn't want a portrait like this where everybody's squinting or, I imagine if I had a family standing here in this photo, I would have little kids like putting their hands up to their eyes and dad would be squinting, his eyes closed. Like it just would not be great. So how do we get a nice, beautiful photo without having that harsh sun right in their face? So I want you to take a look at the shadow here. You can tell that the sun is in front of him because the shadow falls behind. So we know that the light is coming this way. So what would happen if we just turn him around? And now look where his shadow is in front of him. And look how different that is. He's still out in that bright sun playing, throwing leaves and sticks and all that, but the lighting on him is so much smoother. It's so much more even. And so let's look at those side by side. We have the really harsh light making him squint. But then if you have him just turn into his shadow, if you have people turn where they're facing their shadow, that's the key to remember, is have the sun at their back and have them face their shadow. Then you've got nice even lighting on them and it looks so much better. So what other things? So here we're in the harsh sun and just to the left out of the frame here, there's a big tree. And I initially, in this photo, had her stand kind of over close to the tree. And so you've got this darkness there. This is one of those scenarios where technically, like the sun is behind her and it's still kind of coming in quite a bit, like right there on the side, but it's still kind of behind her. So like this is better, but look at the dramatic difference. Like it's really, really different. And there's kind of some green. So what I did was I kept my camera settings the same and I have her, if you look over here to the right, you can see that there's a sidewalk and all I did was have her move onto that sidewalk. I did nothing else. She literally took, it was probably 3 big steps backwards and look at the difference. The camera settings were the same. And I want to point out to you why that was. So in the first photo on the left, she is standing on the grass and she is standing near a big tree that is blocking any open light from the sky. When I had her take 3 giant steps backwards to that sidewalk, she still has her back to the sun, but now she has this natural reflector under her and there is open sky above her. And look at how much more even and beautiful that light is because that sidewalk is bouncing light onto her. And the open sky is keeping there from being really dark green shadows on her. So when you have some sort of a natural, we call them natural reflectors, that could be pavement, like a sidewalk here. It could even be like pebble gravel, anything light colored. It could be a building that the light is bouncing off of and kind of bouncing back to the person. Like if there were a light colored building here that the sun was bouncing light off of, the sun was not bouncing any light off of this tree. It's too dark. All this dark tree over here was doing is absorbing that light. It was taking it all in. But if we had something here that was like a natural reflector, light colored, that light could bounce off of, that would be a great option. But even just having the sidewalk here, there's such a dramatic difference. So again, she's looking into her shadow in both of these, but you still have to watch out for what else is around and take a look around for those natural reflectors. Now, this photo would have been better even if we didn't have this sidewalk here. Just by having her move away from that tree a little bit, she would have gotten some better light up on her face. But she was so close to this dark tree that it was really kind of manipulating the light in the photo in a way that we did not like. So here's just another example. You can kind of tell by looking at the spots of sun and the shadows in this photo that the sun was behind her. So it's not, in this shot, it's not directly behind. It was pretty far overhead. You can tell by the sun up here, but it's a little bit this way. And there's a little bit of sun here, but that doesn't bother me because her face and the main part of her body is evenly lit. So that's what I'm looking for, is I'm looking for an evenly lit subject. So here you can see the shadow on the ground. The sun was really high. It was just a tiny bit behind them, but it was pretty close to being over their head. But nonetheless, I had them turn into their shadow and look, I mean, it's a beautiful photo. And they're in the middle of the harsh sun, but they're on a natural reflector and they're looking into their shadow. Now, I get it. We don't always have a natural reflector around. We don't always have a sidewalk. If you're going to be shooting in the middle of the day, it's a really good idea to choose your location wisely, either in places that have really even light or look for a spot that has some sort of natural reflector like a sidewalk or a pathway. But again, you may not always have that. So if you don't, you can still use this concept of turning them into their shadow and still get that nice, beautiful lighting on them. So let's go back to, I had mentioned before, shooting it out in the desert and in that harsh sun, no trees around, nothing. So what do? So here you can see a perfect example. You can tell that the light is over here behind her and we have her turned into her shadow. Beautiful image, turned out great. So here's kind of a behind the scenes shot. These are a couple of photographers that I was with that day. If you look down here, you can see their shadows. So you can tell that we can't see her shadow, but we can see this one. So you know that her shadow is this way. So she is turned into her shadow. The sun is behind her and we're getting these really gorgeous, beautiful images. So she's got nice, even lighting on her face. It was nearly 12 p.m. I mean, it was almost noon and beautiful images out in the middle of the day. So next time you're faced with harsh lighting situations, I don't want you to panic. I don't want you to feel like you have to run to the shade. You can. There are times that having the shade is a lifesaver, but I really want you to think about how you can position your subjects and use natural reflectors around you, if you have them, to still get really, really beautiful images.